Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're starting part 2 of an awesome What If Deku Had a Harem with Momo story. If you want to see part 3, drop a comment below and tell me what you think. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. It really helps the channel grow. Now sit back, relax, and let's jump into the story. Somehow, Izuku managed to endure a weekend in captivity. However, that was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, a week without Momo. 7 whole days without any physical contact or interaction with his girlfriend. With little else to occupy his time, Izuku found himself at his training beach, dedicating his efforts to cleaning the area. Recently, tidying up the beach had become his primary focus during his free time. While he still practiced martial arts to keep his skills sharp, there was a specific reason for prioritizing the beach cleanup. He thought about how wonderful it would be to bring Momo there. He found himself lost in thoughts of partner. Shaking his head to clear his mind, Izuku decided to take a break. He sat down next to his workout bag and noticed his phone vibrating. It was a message from Todoroki. Intrigued, he read the text. Todoroki asked if Izuku was busy the following day. When Izuku replied that he was free, Todoroki explained that he had told his older siblings about his new friend, and his sister wanted to invite Izuku over for dinner. Izuku hesitated, mentioning that he wasn't allowed to go out at night for a while. However, Todoroki suggested lunch instead, which Izuku agreed to, feeling relieved. Todoroki assured him that he would send the time and address, and Izuku confirmed he would be there. Todoroki added a light-hearted comment about dealing with his father if necessary, which left Izuku puzzled, but he chose to brush it off for the moment. Meanwhile, Katsuki was out for a jog, feeling frustrated. He thought about how Izuku had ignored him, punched him, and even danced with someone he found infuriating. The next time he saw Izuku, he was determined to confront him. As he jogged along the trash-strewn beach, he spotted a familiar head of messy green hair. Katsuki's fists clenched, and he felt a surge of anger. There was Izuku, and there would be no more hiding. He stormed across the sand, ready to confront him. Izuku was startled by Katsuki's loud voice. Turning slowly, he faced an enraged Katsuki, who accused him of hiding. Katsuki's anger seemed more intense than usual, and Izuku felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. Before he could think further, Katsuki grabbed him by the collar of his tank top. Katsuki shouted threats, his anger palpable. Izuku, confused and scared, asked what he had done to deserve such fury. Katsuki's accusations flew at him, mentioning the dance with someone he deemed unworthy. Izuku's fear shifted to something else entirely, as he felt the pressure of Katsuki's grip. He demanded Katsuki take back his words, his voice steady despite the tension. Katsuki, taken aback by the unexpected firmness, shouted back, but Izuku held his ground, surprising both of them with his newfound resolve. Just then, a police officer approached, having noticed the commotion. He intervened, warning the boys to stop or face consequences at the station. Still upset with Katsuki, Izuku pushed him away and gathered his belongings, walking off with a mix of anger and determination. Katsuki stared at Izuku's retreating figure, struggling to comprehend the transformation he had just witnessed. The shy, timid Izuku he knew seemed to have vanished, leaving behind someone he barely recognized. The officer observed Katsuki with curiosity, recalling stories of his reputation from Aldera Junior High, and wondering if further investigation was warranted. Later, Izuku arrived home, feeling the adrenaline from earlier begin to fade. He reflected on his actions and words. He had stood up to Kachan, and surprisingly, he felt a sense of courage rather than fear. There was still a hint of anxiety about how Kachan might respond, but he felt empowered to face it. Was this what confidence felt like? Meanwhile, Momo had just finished a weapons training session with one of her instructors and was wiping the sweat from her brow with a towel. She intended to take a refreshing shower, but her parents called her to their study instead. Their serious expressions greeted her. She asked if they needed her, and her mother gestured for her to take a seat. Momo sensed the weight of the conversation ahead, a scenario she had encountered before. Her mother asked if she remembered a young Todoroki from their event last week, to which Momo nodded. Although she hadn't spoken to him, Izuku had mentioned forming a connection with him. This revelation surprised her parents and sparked a glimmer of hope. Her father continued, revealing that Todoroki's father, Enji Todoroki, had accompanied him. Momo felt a knot in her stomach at the mention of the flame hero, Endeavor. Her father sighed and got to the point, stating that Endeavor had requested her presence for lunch with him and his son the following day. A bitter taste filled Momo's mouth as she realized this was yet another attempt at an arranged union driven by selfish motives. While she didn't want to judge Todoroki, especially since Izuku spoke highly of him, the situation cast a shadow on the Todoroki family in her eyes. Her father acknowledged her frustration, but reminded her that Endeavor had made it clear that unless she was already engaged, she interrupted, expressing her willingness to attend. Her parents were taken aback by her sudden decision. Momo explained that since Izuku had befriended Todoroki, she trusted his judgment. While she wouldn't entertain any proposals from Endeavor, she felt it was important to get to know Todoroki, especially since they would likely meet again through Izuku. Her parents understood her reasoning. Engaging with Endeavor could prevent him from taking any rash actions. However, they worried about the possibility of Izuku finding out or getting involved. But what were the odds of that happening? Later that night, Izuku lay down to rest, feeling exhausted both mentally and physically. He recalled the events of the day, training at the beach, dealing with Kachan's teasing, standing up for Momo, and the intervention of a police officer. He also remembered agreeing to lunch with the Todorokis. He sighed, feeling overwhelmed. Suddenly, a familiar voice broke through his thoughts, playfully offering to help him relax. Izuku's eyes shot open, surprised by the tone. Standing at his bedroom door was Momo, dressed in a short red nightgown. He stammered, unsure of how to respond to her unexpected appearance. Momo greeted him warmly, playfully noting that she thought he would be happy to see her. Izuku quickly apologized, flustered by her presence. Momo giggled and placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. She teased him, finding him adorable when he was embarrassed. Momo climbed onto his bed, playfully pinning him beneath her. She admired his politeness, but decided to encourage him to look at her. As she gently stroked his cheek, she guided his gaze, revealing her figure. Izuku's mind raced with confusion and surprise at her boldness. Almost as if sensing his thoughts, Momo placed a soft kiss on his forehead, leaving him momentarily speechless. She encouraged him to look, expressing her enjoyment of his attention. Momo leaned in closer, kissing him on the lips in a sweet, affectionate manner that left him breathless. When she pulled away, a delicate connection lingered between them. Momo playfully teased him, leaning closer, and whispered in his ear, making his heart race. She assured him that she was all his, adding a playful tone to the moment. Izuku jolted awake, scanning his bedroom for the enchanting figure from his dream. To his relief and disappointment, he found no one there. However, he noticed something unusual, something warm and sticky. He pulled back the sheets to reveal a noticeable stain on his boxers, feeling a wave of embarrassment wash over him. As he made his way down the street to his friend's house, the images of his dream lingered in his mind. He reassured himself that it was normal to have such dreams about someone he cared for. Today was meant to be a pleasant lunch with Todoroki, a chance to meet his family. He promised himself that there would be no thoughts of Momo today. It was a day free from her presence. Suddenly, he heard a familiar voice call out to him, causing him to nearly stumble. To his astonishment, he saw Momo standing there, the girl of his dreams. In a flashback, Endeavor entered the living room with a grin. He announced to Shoto that they would have a special guest for lunch. Shoto responded with a look of disdain, clarifying that it was his friend coming over. Endeavor appeared puzzled by this revelation. Fuyumi, from the kitchen, chimed in, asking if Shoto's friend liked katsudon. Both Shoto and Endeavor turned to see her cooking various dishes, while Natsuo volunteered to taste test. Endeavor's voice boomed in surprise as he questioned the situation. He explained that he had invited a friend from a party, partly due to his children's insistence. Shoto's cold demeanor returned, and Fuyumi suggested they accommodate both guests, proposing that they could all share the meal together. Presently, Shoto greeted his guests at the entrance, expressing his happiness that Midoriya could join them. Izuku smiled back, grateful for the invitation. Shoto then recognized Momo and greeted her, to which she responded with a nod. As they entered the house, they removed their shoes and proceeded to the dining room, where they were welcomed by a woman with white hair and red highlights, wearing glasses. She expressed her gratitude for their presence at the meal. They all took their seats, with Izuku positioned between Shoto and Momo, across from Natsuo, Fuyumi, and Endeavor. Fuyumi introduced herself as Shoto's older sister and introduced Natsuo, who waved politely. Shoto then introduced Izuku as his friend from the Yayorozu party. Izuku straightened up, feeling a bit nervous as he greeted everyone. While the Todoroki siblings seemed to take a liking to him, Endeavor observed silently, feeling a mix of disbelief and irritation. He questioned why Shoto had chosen this particular friend, especially since he was seated next to Momo. Momo introduced herself, and although Endeavor found the situation frustrating, he decided to accept it since Momo appeared comfortable. As they began to enjoy Fuyumi's cooking, conversation flowed. Momo expressed surprise that Shoto was planning to attend UA as well. He confirmed this in his usual stoic manner, and she revealed that she also planned to enroll there. Endeavor smiled slightly, commenting that they would surely impress their classmates. Meanwhile, Izuku felt a pang of discomfort as Endeavor focused his attention on Shoto and Momo, leaving him feeling somewhat overlooked and unwelcome. Natsuo inquired about Midoriya's hobbies, prompting a shy response from him. Midoriya shared that he had been taking notes on quirks and heroes since he was 4, filling entire volumes of notebooks at home. Normally reserved, he felt a sense of openness today, perhaps due to being invited to lunch and the friendly atmosphere created by his friend's siblings. Additionally, he felt a comforting squeeze from his girlfriend's hand beneath the table. Natsuo remarked on Midoriya's extensive knowledge of quirks, while Endeavor interjected, suggesting that Midoriya should focus on self-improvement. Midoriya lowered his gaze, recognizing the truth in Endeavor's words, but also sensing the underlying criticism. Natsuo and Shoto exchanged glances, silently expressing their disapproval of their father's comment. Fuyumi then shifted the conversation, mentioning her recent experience teaching at an elementary school. She asked Midoriya about his goals, which struck a chord with him, causing a pang of uncertainty in his chest. He hesitated before admitting that he had always wanted to be a hero, but he was still considering his options. Endeavor dismissed his hesitation, labeling him as timid, while Fuyumi reassured him that it was okay not to have a clear path yet. Midoriya felt uplifted by Fuyumi's encouragement and the warmth of Momo's hand. Shoto inquired about Midoriya's theories on quirks, to which Midoriya responded affirmatively. Shoto contemplated the possibility of having a more open-minded trainer in the future. After finishing their meal, Shoto decided to walk the guests out, seeking a moment away from his father. Fuyumi attempted to maintain a positive outlook, while Endeavor expressed frustration over Midoriya's presence, questioning Shoto's judgment in befriending him. Natsuo defended Midoriya passionately, arguing that the positive influence was beneficial for Shoto, who had become more expressive and even smiled since Midoriya's arrival. Nat's outburst led him to storm off, leaving Endeavor seething in silence. Fuyumi, overwhelmed by the tension, buried her face in her hands, reflecting on how the lunch had turned out. Outside, Shoto overheard snippets of the confrontation, but Midoriya and Momo remained unaware of the full extent of the exchange. Midoriya complimented Shoto's siblings, apologizing for the discomfort his father had caused. Although his face was hidden by his hair, resentment in his voice was palpable, sending a chill through Momo and Shoto. Their thoughts were interrupted when Momo's driver arrived. Expressing gratitude for their hospitality, Momo offered Midoriya a ride home. Midoriya, still preoccupied with his thoughts about the lunch, hesitated before asking if they could make a quick stop. Momo agreed, albeit confused, and Midoriya then turned to Shoto, revealing that he wanted to take him somewhere special. At Dagobah Municipal Beach, the trio descended to a clean area where Midoriya practiced his fighting techniques. Shoto, sounding annoyed, questioned why Midoriya had brought him to the training beach. Midoriya, undeterred, explained that it was a good place to release pent-up frustrations. He shared that he often came here to clear his mind, appreciating the calming sound of the waves and the solitude it provided. He encouraged Shoto to let loose, inviting him to join in the practice. Izuku was interrupted by Todoroki placing his palm on the sand, creating an instant glacier in front of him. The massive ice formation covered a third of the beach in an instant, propelling a significant amount of trash out of its limits. The sudden display of Todoroki's raw power nearly knocked Midoriya off of his feet, but fortunately, Yaoyorozu was there to steady him. Todoroki exhaled, mist escaping his mouth as frost covered more than half of his body. He apologized, acknowledging that he might have overdone it a bit, and walked toward his glacier, using his flames to melt it down. He admitted that his anger had gotten the better of him. Izuku couldn't help but think that if Todoroki had unleashed a heatwave instead, he would have turned the beach into a glass surface. Once Todoroki's body temperature returned to normal and most of the ice had melted, Izuku approached him, asking if he felt any better. Todoroki replied affirmatively, turning to face him with a neutral expression and asking if he could come to vent every now and then. Izuku was taken aback but smiled, assuring Todoroki that he didn't mind at all. Later, after an intense lunch and meeting a new acquaintance, Momo returned home and lay down on her bed. She quickly sat up when she felt gentle hands massaging her shoulders. Surprised, she recognized Izuku, who smiled at her and explained that he was there to help her relax. Although she knew they could get in trouble if caught, she couldn't resist the comfort of his touch, especially when he wrapped her in a warm hug from behind. As he sighed blissfully against her neck, Momo recalled a moment when she had proposed to him, her face flushed with embarrassment. Izuku teased her, saying he had an answer for her proposal and expressed that he didn't want to live without her, ending with a gentle kiss on her neck. Suddenly, Momo jolted awake in her bed, clutching her chest and breathing heavily. Realizing it had all been a dream and that Izuku was not there, she felt a wave of sadness wash over her. At Dagobah Municipal Beach, Todoroki showcased his ultimate move, declaring, "Heaven-piercing ice wall." His friends praised him for the impressive display of power and noted his improved control. Todoroki explained the versatility of his technique, which could serve as a barrier, platform, or even encase enemies. Izuku quickly took notes, muttering to himself as he did. Todoroki demonstrated his ice's speed by encasing a discarded fridge, prompting Izuku to remark that fighting him without a strategy would be unwise. Todoroki then mentioned that he had devised new moves with his quirk, prompting Izuku to eagerly agree to see them. Momo took his hand and led him to a spacious area of the beach, instructing him to charge at her when she said to. Despite his hesitation, Izuku ran toward Momo, who mirrored his action. Just before they reached striking distance, two items fell from Momo's shirt: a springboard and a flashbang grenade. As she jumped off the springboard, the flash went off, but it wasn't too bright in the daylight, allowing Izuku to recover quickly. When he did, he saw Momo above him, her wrist glowing pink and blue. A thin but strong rope shot from her wrist, wrapping around his ankles. With a swift yank, she brought him down to the ground. He praised her impressive move as she blushed, explaining that she had drawn inspiration from a pre-Quirk era comic book about a web-slinging hero. Momo offered him a hand to help him up, noting that she could have done more but didn't want to seriously blind him with smoke bombs. Another day of rigorous quirk training had come to an end, and Izuku was proving to be an excellent instructor for both Momo and Shoto, always coming up with creative ways for them to enhance their abilities. In the late afternoon, they decided to end their training session. Momo was the first to leave, and Izuku was about to follow her, but he noticed Todoroki looking troubled. Shoto was staring at his left hand as a small flame flickered to life in his palm. It lasted only a moment before he frowned and extinguished it. Midoriya expressed concern for his friend. Shoto gazed at the horizon, revealing his inner turmoil. He admitted to feeling a deep resentment towards his father. Izuku understood, acknowledging that Shoto had every right to feel that way. Although he didn't know everything, Shoto had shared some of his past with him and Momo. The complicated quirk marriage of his parents, the harsh training he endured since childhood, how his siblings were seen as failures, and the origin of his scar. Momo and Izuku felt a mix of horror and anger towards the number 2 hero. It was a relief for Shoto to discuss these feelings with friends he trusted. They reassured him that he didn't have to comply with his father's wishes. Izuku encouraged Shoto not to let his father hold him back. He emphasized that if Shoto truly wanted something, he needed to pursue it wholeheartedly. Limiting himself to only using his right side due to endeavor would ultimately harm him more than it would his father. He recalled his mother's wisdom, explaining that harboring resentment was like consuming poison while expecting the other person to suffer. Shoto turned to face Izuku, his eyes glistening with emotion. He understood that while he didn't have to accept his father, the choice of how to use his quirk was his alone. Izuku believed that when the time came, Shoto would make the right decision. With that, Izuku left Shoto to reflect. The icy hot teen examined his hands as frost and fire danced from them. He pondered the idea of taking control of his own power, recalling his mother's encouraging words about being true to himself. With a bittersweet smile, Shoto gathered his belongings and headed home, feeling grateful for Midoriya's support. At the Midoriya household, Inko sat across the dinner table from her son, curious about his day. Izuku shared that training had gone well, mentioning Momo's new moves and Shoto's progress. He noted that it was becoming easier to get Shoto to accept suggestions. Inko felt happiness knowing her son had both a girlfriend and a close friend, people who brought joy into his life. She expressed confidence that Momo and Shoto would excel in UA's hero course, attributing part of their success to Izuku's guidance. This made Izuku feel a warmth in his heart. The idea that he could help his friends improve was a source of joy for him. Later that night, after dinner, Shoto wandered through his family's empty garden, seeking solitude for what he intended to do, especially away from his father. He raised his left hand, summoning a flame that he chose to let grow, allowing it to envelop his entire hand. With his right arm lifted to the night sky, a large pillar of flames erupted, filling him with a comforting warmth that contrasted with the cool night air. As he embraced the flames, he recalled his friend's encouraging words about not being held back and realizing that the ultimate decision lay with him. With a small smile, Shoto made his way to his room to rest for the night. Meanwhile, Momo sat on her bed, reflecting on her relationship with Izuku. She thought about his reaction to their potential future together. Their first date, their training sessions, and their first kiss. Each memory brought her joy, and she confidently affirmed that she had made the right choice. Momo was completely enamored with Izuku Midoriya, and she sensed that he felt the same way. While she might have preferred to take things slowly, the complications introduced by Endeavor had pushed her to consider their future more seriously. Despite the challenges, Momo couldn't deny that a significant part of her desired to move forward with Izuku, knowing she couldn't envision a future with anyone else. His birthday was just a week away, and she wondered if that would be an appropriate time for a special moment, or if he would prefer something more casual. The thought of Endeavor potentially proposing to her with Todoroki made her anxious, as it could jeopardize the friendship between him and Izuku. She also considered her own relationship with him, not wanting to overwhelm him again. Momo sighed as she approached her vanity, opening a drawer to retrieve a small black box. She decided that she would wait until after his birthday to make her move. 4 days later, during the week of Izuku's birthday, he was enjoying time with Shoto and Momo. The trio spent the day exploring the town, trying to experience life as normal teenagers. For Shoto, it was a refreshing change, as he finally felt like he belonged. They visited an arcade where they played games and won plush prizes, and later stopped at a vendor to order crepes. Izuku felt blissful as he savored his crepe hand in hand with Momo. The joy on his face made Momo blush and smile widely. Shoto, feeling like a third wheel, noticed their engrossed expressions and decided to break the moment. Before he could speak, a small figure bumped into Izuku's leg, drawing their attention. They looked down to see a tiny child with long white hair and a small horn. Realizing she was no older than 5, Izuku knelt down and asked if she was all right. The little girl recoiled slightly, but he gently lifted her to her feet, noting how light she was. He observed that her arms and legs were wrapped in bandages, and her bright red eyes were filled with fear. Momo inquired if something was wrong, but the girl only trembled and whimpered, leaving the teenagers puzzled about her distress. Suddenly, a voice interrupted them, revealing the girl's father. They turned to see a man in a suit and a green coat, wearing a doctor's plague mask that resembled a bird's beak. His unsettling appearance only added to the girl's fear, which intensified as she clung to Izuku. The man apologized for the trouble, claiming his daughter was simply a rowdy child. However, Eri's expression conveyed a deeper sense of trauma. She whispered to Izuku, pleading for him not to leave her. Instinctively, he comforted her, feeling her trembling grow worse whenever her father spoke. Concerned, he asked if the girl was all right, but the man interrupted, dismissing her condition as mere clumsiness. Shoto interjected, suggesting that Eri was actually terrified, which prompted the man to glare at him. Seizing the moment, Izuku reached into his pocket, feeling a surge of determination. The man questioned their right to judge his parenting, to which Shoto retorted about knowing a thing or two about poor fathers. Momo scolded Shoto, while Izuku continued to reassure Eri, promising her that everything would be okay. However, his expression turned serious as he confronted her father, demanding to know what he had put her through. The man's patience was wearing thin, and he sighed in frustration at being questioned by children. He moved his hand towards his glove, preparing to teach them a lesson. As his bare palm touched the wall nearby, a series of spikes erupted towards them. Shoto quickly planted his foot down, conjuring a wall of ice to protect them. Izuku, holding Eri tightly, dashed away, surprising both Shoto and Momo and infuriating the man. The man shouted for Izuku to return, but Shoto's ice wall shattered, sending shards flying. The ground beneath Izuku began to tremble, and he braced himself as he ran. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed as Izuku collapsed, his unconscious body cushioning Eri's fall. A shrill scream escaped her lips, and tears streamed down her face. The other three paused their confrontation, their attention drawn to Eri as a pale golden light began to emanate from her. Darn it! Her quirk is going wild again. Time for a nap, Eri. The man placed his hand on a large slab of ice, which shattered, sending a bowling ball-sized chunk crashing down onto Eri's head, rendering her unconscious and halting her mysterious power. As the light faded, everyone could see Izuku's condition, which was alarming. His right leg had been pierced from behind, his left thigh was stained with blood from a deep cut, and he had a significant wound near his abdomen. He lay on the ground face down, blood seeping from his mouth, his eyes open yet devoid of life. Todoroki turned to confront the one responsible for his friend's state. A fierce surge of flames erupted from his left side. The man quickly erected a barrier of ice and stone. As Shoto continued to unleash his flames at the villain, Momo remained frozen in shock at the sight before her. Izuku, her cherished angel, lay on the ground with life-threatening injuries. Tears streamed down her face as fear gripped her heart, fearing he might be lost. That boy! When I get my hands on him, the villain shouted, but Shoto interjected. You'll be nothing but ash before then. Another emotion began to swell within Momo. She slowly turned her gaze toward the attacker of her beloved. She felt anguish, fear, and guilt for not being able to save him as he had saved her. How dare you! She sprinted and leaped onto a dumpster, vaulting over Shoto and the villain's struggle. Her arm glowed as she quickly fashioned a weapon. That's my Izuku! She thrust a sharp metal spear at the villain, striking his shoulder. He cried out in pain, losing his balance and eventually collapsing. In her quick thinking, she had coated the spear's tip with a mild neurotoxin, even in the chaos. Shoto's flames had melted the villain's barrier, allowing him to create a path for Momo. They rushed to where Izuku and Eri lay. Blood pooled around Izuku's body, while Eri had a small trickle of blood running down the back of her head, using his clean arm as a pillow. Izuku! Momo stammered through her sobs, feeling her heart shatter as she looked at him. We can still help him. Yaoyorozu, we need bandages, Shoto urged, snapping her out of her despair. Following his command, Momo created 2 rolls of medical tape. They hurriedly tended to their injured friends, wrapping Izuku's torso and legs, and Eri's head. In their frantic efforts, they failed to notice Eri's horn sparksing and flickering like a festive light. As they finished, the sound of police sirens and ambulances approached. Momo and Todoroki were puzzled until they spotted Izuku's phone that had slipped from his pocket. He had sent out an emergency signal, alerting local authorities and heroes to their exact location. He hadn't fled without taking precautions. He had thought ahead. Although they could have arrived sooner, Shoto mused as the paramedics approached. "He needs help," Momo cried, tears streaming down her face. "This one too," Shoto added, holding Eri. "My goodness, what happened to these two?" the doctor exclaimed. "The villain in that alley attacked us. He's unconscious now, though," Shoto explained, directing the police to the alley. "And what happened to you?" a police officer inquired, noticing Shoto's singed shirt. "I was fighting to protect my friends." Meanwhile, Momo boarded the ambulance with Izuku and Eri sharing a cot. While she held his hand and wept, Eri clung to his side, a few tears escaping her eyes. Unconsciously, Izuku squeezed Momo's hand. Breaking news: an incident occurred at the now-revealed Shie Hasekai base of operations. The leader of this criminal organization, Kai Chisaki, known as Overhaul, has been apprehended by the police on charges of aggravated assault on minors. The investigation is ongoing. Shoto scowled as a picture of Overhaul appeared on the screen. "That's who you fought, Shoto?" Fuyumi asked. "The leader of a crime syndicate? I can't even imagine what Dad will say," Natsuo exclaimed. Shoto stood up and walked away. "I don't care what he has to say." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, messaging the person he disliked the most for training. "Don't make me regret this endeavor." 2 of the minors used their quirks to defend themselves, while the other alerted local authorities. His wise judgment allowed for multiple arrests and dealt a significant blow to the criminal underworld. The boy who called for help was gravely injured and is now in intensive care. The name of the victim is 14-year-old Izuku Midoriya. Masaru covered his mouth in disbelief, exclaiming in shock that Izuku was in the hospital. Mitsuki, taken aback, raised her voice in surprise. Katsuki, who had been watching the news with his parents, excused himself to retreat to his bedroom. He felt a surge of exhilaration, reveling in what he perceived as poetic justice. He thought about how Izuku might finally learn his lesson, feeling a twisted satisfaction that he could not have delivered the blow himself. He imagined the worst for Izuku, hoping that this would teach him to know his place. Meanwhile, a voice echoed through the hospital, detailing Izuku Midoriya's injuries, sustained while heroically protecting a small child from a criminal organization. Sakusei Yaoyorozu sighed, holding a cup of green tea, lamenting the cruel hand fate had dealt Izuku. He expressed concern for Momo and Inko, who must be feeling distraught. I added that Izuku's bravery had saved countless hours of investigation, and, most importantly, a child's life. Inko and Momo stood side by side, gazing through the window of Izuku's hospital room. He lay still, bandages wrapped around his legs and torso, an IV bag connected to him. The doctor reassured them that Izuku had shown signs of consciousness and simply needed to rest, but the sight of him in such a state was heart-wrenching. It was painful to witness someone they cared for so deeply in what felt like a life-and-death situation. Inko, her voice trembling, asked why Izuku was sharing the bed with a little girl. Eri was nestled against his side, her head resting on his chest. The doctor explained that Eri had woken up first after their arrival. Attempts to separate her from Izuku had resulted in her becoming distressed, activating her quirk. Since she was only calm around him, they decided it was best to allow her to stay with him for now, to keep her at ease. The doctor noted that Eri had already formed a bond with Izuku. After that, she left the two women to watch over him. Until Izuku regained consciousness, he couldn't have visitors. Eventually, they had to leave. As they reached Inko's car, she turned to Momo, who had been silent since their arrival, and expressed her concern. Momo, feeling overwhelmed, admitted to feeling useless. Inko's eyes widened in surprise as Momo expressed her guilt for not being able to help Izuku when he had saved her. Inko embraced her, allowing her to release her frustration and self-blame. She reassured Momo that Izuku had acted heroically, saving them both and preventing any fatalities. She believed Izuku would be okay and that he would want to see Momo's smiling face first when he woke up. Momo quietly wept into Inko's shoulder, sharing her worries about Izuku. Inko reminded her that the doctors were doing everything possible and that Eri was there looking after him. This thought brought a small smile to Momo's face. After they dried their eyes, they got into the car and drove away. Inko then suggested something that might lift Momo's spirits, asking if she trusted her. Momo, with her red, puffy eyes, affirmed her trust. They returned to Inko's apartment, where Momo felt a bit confused but followed Inko's lead. Inko led her to Izuku's room, offering her a place to stay for the night. Momo was surprised and hesitant, not wanting to impose. Inks insisted, wanting to provide comfort. She felt that since Izuku had already spent a night in her bed, it was only fair. Momo took a deep breath as she entered Izuku's room, thanking Inko and bowing politely. Inko encouraged her to call her by her first name and wished her to get some rest before closing the door behind her. Momo found herself in a smaller room than her own, adorned with hero posters and workout weights. She searched through his closet for something to help her sleep, discovering Izuku's blue hoodie. With a nervous gulp, she slipped it on, deciding she would apologize later. It was a size too small, but Momo felt no discomfort. She zipped it up past her bust and inhaled the collar, finding solace in her lover's scent. Sitting on his bed, she noticed a framed photo on his desk, capturing the moment they first trained together at her home, a small heart drawn in the corner. Momo held the picture close to her chest as tears of sadness and love streamed down her cheeks. After a few moments of quiet reflection, she climbed into his bed, enveloped in a blanket that smelled just like him. It felt as though he were there, holding her, which helped her drift off to sleep. In the hospital, Izuku stirred as he gradually woke up. He stretched his sore muscles, quickly becoming aware of the condition of his body. He winced at the pain in his right leg and side, realizing he was in a hospital bed. The movement roused Eri, who rubbed the sleep from her eyes and saw that Izuku was awake. She immediately moved to the edge of the bed, her tiny voice breaking the silence. She felt a wave of guilt wash over her, realizing he had been hurt because of her. Izuku gently placed his hand on her cheek, wiping away her tears to calm her. He asked if she was okay, and she looked up at him, confusion in her eyes. There was no anger or disgust on his face, only genuine care. When he inquired about her injuries, she shook her head, prompting a smile from him. Izuku expressed his relief that she was okay, and Eri felt an overwhelming urge to be closer to him, to feel his warmth again. She silently nodded in response to his question about whether she had been with him the whole time, like a guardian angel. He acknowledged her concern, thanking her for being so thoughtful. He wrapped Eri in a hug before drifting off to sleep again. Silent tears streamed down her face as she reflected on his kindness despite his injuries. She wished to stay close to him, to be with him, and those were her last thoughts before she peacefully fell asleep for the first time. The next morning, Momo awoke after a restful night, grateful for Izuku's bed. Although she felt better, a void remained in her heart that would only be filled when Izuku returned. Rolling onto her side, she noticed something on his desk. Next to the framed photo was Izuku's martial arts book, but beneath it lay a smaller book that piqued her curiosity. She reached under the book and discovered something that made her heart race. It was the notebook she had made for him. Though her rational mind urged her to put it back, her curiosity and longing for Izuku prevailed. She opened it to the first page and found a pencil sketch of herself in the outfit she wore on their first date. Momo blushed at Izuku's artistic impression of her, marveling at how beautiful he made her look. As she turned the pages, she found descriptions of her quirk and theories for improvement, along with paragraphs detailing her likes, kindness, and humility. Momo felt her cheeks heat up as she closed the notebook, overwhelmed by the realization of how much he admired her. She wiped a tear from her eye, thinking that she didn't deserve someone like him. Her phone buzzed, and she saw messages from Todoroki and Yaoyorozu. They exchanged greetings and discussed their well-being, with Momo mentioning her plans to visit Izuku again. Todoroki regrettably declined to join her, but promised to write a letter. As Momo set her phone down, Inko entered the room, greeting her warmly. Momo blushed, realizing she had slept in Izuku's hoodie and let her hair down. She apologized for needing comfort, but Inko reassured her that it was perfectly fine. After offering her breakfast, Inko placed a tray on Momo's lap, suggesting she could keep the hoodie until Izuku returned home. Momo happily accepted the offer and greatly enjoyed breakfast prepared by her boyfriend's mother in his bed. The meal was well made, and the gesture brought a comforting feeling to her heart. She could taste the love in every bite. With her stomach full, Momo climbed out of Izuku's bed, already missing the warmth it provided. She neatly made his bed, and a chime from her phone alerted her that her parents' chauffeur was waiting outside. Before leaving, Momo wanted to at least have Inko's phone number. Meanwhile, Katsuki was frustrated. It was no surprise. His parents had dragged him out of the house to visit Inko and check on her well-being. He thought to himself that he just wanted to celebrate the nerd being in the hospital in peace. To make matters worse, when he checked the news and social media, everyone was talking about Deku's heroism. Even some of his classmates were praising him, but Katsuki planned to set them straight when summer was over. Masaru expressed his concern, hoping Izuku would get better soon. Mitsuki reassured him that the kid was tough and would pull through. Katsuki added that at least Izuku got what he deserved for that sucker punch, which earned him a light smack from Mitsuki. The Bakugos arrived at Inko's doorstep and knocked twice. Mitsuki called out to see if Inko was home as she opened the door. She expected to find Inko crying alone. Instead, they saw the green-haired woman smiling and engaged in conversation with someone. They both turned to the door. Momo recognized the name Mitsuki and thought to herself that she must be Izuku's Aunt Mitsuki, as she seemed familiar with Inko. Momo stood up and straightened herself out, wanting to make a good first impression. Mitsuki looked over Inko's shoulder and locked eyes with Momo, making her feel as if she had been targeted. In an instant, Mrs. Bakugo was face to face with Momo, almost pressing against her. She exclaimed that Momo must be her nephew's elusive lady friend and remarked on how strange it was to meet her after she had spent a night with him. Momo blushed heavily, stuttering and struggling to form words. She felt she had already messed up her first meeting with Izuku's aunt before she even had a chance to say hello. Suddenly, she felt Mitsuki's hand gently tapping her head. Mitsuki introduced herself, playfully stating that Izuku had nabbed himself a pretty one. Momo sighed and laughed nervously, thanking her. Then she felt Mitsuki gripping her shoulder tightly and teasingly mentioning she had heard about Momo's night with Izuku. Inko looked away as Momo turned bright red. Mitsuki closed her eyes with a playful smile, her grip making Momo tremble. She warned Momo to exercise a little control, and Momo nervously agreed, thinking that this was the most intimidating woman she had ever met. Masaru intervened, saving Momo from his wife's teasing. He reassured her that Mitsuki was the last person who should be lecturing about keeping emotions in check. Masaru shook Momo's hand and introduced himself, while Mitsuki fumed playfully. Meanwhile, Katsuki watched from the doorway with an unreadable expression. He assessed Momo, noting that she was a beautiful girl, slightly taller than him, well-developed, polite, and wearing his hoodie. The adult conversation confirmed everything he needed to know, but he couldn't believe it. He refused to accept it. He pointed at Momo and asked if she was Deku's so-called girlfriend. Momo's expression soured at his disgusted tone. She affirmed her relationship with Izuku, and Katsuki gritted his teeth, feeling a surge of jealousy. He thought that now that Izuku had a beautiful girlfriend, he believed he was better than everyone else, and that was where all his newfound confidence was coming from. He blamed Momo for this change in Izuku. Momo, feeling increasingly irritated by Katsuki, responded that they were clearly discussing two different people. She described Izuku as a kind-hearted gentleman who readily helped others without thinking of himself. She pointed out that his harsh words were merely a reflection of his own insecurities. Katsuki glared at her with disdain. He demanded to know what she had said, asserting his identity as the next #1 hero, Katsuki Bakugo. Momo nearly scoffed at his claim, noting that Izuku had never mentioned him. She reminded him of Izuku's heroic act of saving a child from a criminal organization, questioning what Katsuki had accomplished, implying that he was just an arrogant punk with an inferiority complex. Katsuki stood close to Momo, his furious expression met with her unwavering disdain. There was no trace of fear in her eyes, which only fueled his anger. Mitsuki and Masaru attempted to intervene, but Momo decided it was time to leave, knowing her driver was waiting outside. She glanced back at Katsuki and introduced herself, revealing her identity as the daughter of Japan's wealthiest family and the girlfriend of Izuku Midoriya. With that, she exited the room. Mitsuki and Masaru were embarrassed by their son's behavior, while Katsuki was left in a state of shock. Peering out the door, he saw Momo getting into a luxurious limousine. His teeth ground together in frustration and jealousy, and he vowed to confront Izuku, blaming him for the situation. In the hospital, Izuku awoke with an unpleasant taste in his mouth. A flicker of anger surged within him, accompanied by a strong urge to check on Momo's well-being. However, that feeling faded when he noticed Eri peacefully sleeping beside him. Sitting up, he turned on the television but quickly muted it to avoid waking her. Checking the date, he was startled to realize he had been in the hospital for 3 days. Worry washed over him as he thought of his mother and Momo, likely anxious about him. He lamented the prospect of spending his birthday in the hospital the following day. Feeling a tug on his hospital gown, he looked down to see Eri gazing up at him with concern. She expressed her worry about his sadness, prompting him to reassure her that everything was fine. He explained that his birthday was approaching and he might not be able to celebrate it with his loved ones. Eri, confused, asked what a birthday was, leaving Izuku momentarily stunned. He learned that Eri had never experienced a birthday before, and his heart ached for her. He explained that birthdays were occasions when friends and family gathered to celebrate someone's existence. Eri's expression turned somber as she revealed her lack of such celebrations, and Izuku, filled with compassion, embraced her. He held her close as she quietly cried, unsure of what to say. He reflected on how such a young child could carry so much sorrow and wondered about her past experiences. He noticed her flinch at his touch, revealing scars on her small arms. He comforted her, assuring her that she was safe now and that the man who had harmed her would never reach her again. Eri's sobs began to ease as she expressed her gratitude. Meanwhile, the doctor responsible for Izuku and Eri reviewed the results of Izuku's checkup. She felt sympathy for him, knowing the injuries he had sustained would leave lasting marks. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts, and she was met by 2 police officers. One was a typical-looking man with short black hair, while the other was a bald man with green skin and antennas on his forehead. The doctor greeted them and learned that they were investigating the Yakuza. They requested to see the x-rays of Izuku Midoriya. After she provided them, they noted that he had suffered a fractured fibula and a significant injury near his abdomen. But thankfully, none of the injuries were life-threatening. The detectives expressed skepticism about the doctor's findings, presenting evidence that suggested a much more severe situation. One detective showed her a photo of 3 concrete spikes stained with blood, explaining that one had pierced Izuku's leg, likely breaking his shin. Another spike had reportedly penetrated his torso, potentially causing serious internal damage. The doctor struggled to reconcile this information with Izuku's x-rays, questioning how such severe injuries could have gone unnoticed. The green man spoke up, suggesting they might have a clue about why the injuries weren't as severe as expected. The other two individuals who had been with the child mentioned seeing a bright light emanating from the rescued girl, hinting that she might provide some answers. The doctor disagreed, expressing concern about the little girl's stability. She explained that the child only felt safe when Midoriya was near, and forcing her to interact with strangers could trigger a panic attack. Detective Memori raised his hand to reassure her, stating that it wouldn't be an issue due to his quirk. Their discussion was interrupted by an alert from the doctor's computers, signaling a message from the patient's room. Since Midoriya was conscious, they could proceed with their plans. Izuku and Eri sat side by side, attempting to enjoy the breakfast provided to them. While enjoying might be a stretch, they were hungry and needed the nourishment, even if the hospital food was less than gourmet. A knock on the door drew their attention, and the doctor responsible for their care entered with a smile. She greeted Midoriya and inquired about their well-being. Izuku mentioned that his leg hurt with movement and that he couldn't eat much without discomfort. The doctor frowned slightly, explaining that he would need to stay for another 3 days to ensure there was no overlooked damage. However, she handed him his phone and a charger, which brought him some relief. Grateful, Izuku thanked her. The doctor continued, noting that now that he was awake, they could better assess his injuries and hopefully proceed with Eri's blood test. Izuku noticed Eri, who had been silent, looking down at the snowball in her lap. She expressed her fear about the needles. In a gentle tone, Izuku reassured her that the doctors needed to take her blood to ensure her health and that they were trying to help. He encouraged her by showing that it wouldn't hurt much. He extended his arm to the doctor, who took a small sample of his blood. Afterward, she placed a blue band-aid on the spot. Eri moved slightly away from him but held his hand tightly. With her eyes closed, she extended her arm for the doctor. The doctor prepared a new needle and gently took a sample from Eri's arm. Although she squeaked a little, she allowed the doctor to do her job. Once finished, the doctor praised her for being brave and placed a band-aid on her arm. Eri looked at Izuku with a curious head tilt, asking if he was proud of her. The doctor decided to give them some space, mentioning that detectives would be coming to speak with them about Eric's past and quirk. She advised that Eri might need Izuku to hold her hand tightly during the conversation. Izuku felt a slight tension at the thought of the detective's visit. He explained to Eri that some kind people would come to talk to her about her life. However, Eri began to tremble, recalling memories from her traumatic childhood. Tears filled her eyes as Izuku quickly pulled her close, pressing her head against his chest. The sound of his heartbeat helped her calm down, and he reassured her that they could postpone the meeting if it upset her. Eri sniffled, her shaking gradually subsiding as she asked if he would stay with her. Without hesitation, Izuku promised that he would be there for her, stroking her back to help her relax. Later, Eri and Izuku watched TV together, trying to distract themselves before the visitors arrived. Izuku glanced at his phone, contemplating calling Momo and his mother. However, he worried that talking to them might stress Eri, especially since they hadn't met formally. He also felt uncertain about what to say, particularly after promising his mother that he wouldn't put himself in danger again. The pair turned to the door as it opened, and 2 men entered alongside their doctor. One man appeared ordinary, while the other had a green hue, both wearing trench coats. Eri instinctively backed into Izuku's embrace. Tsukauchi greeted them, asking how they were doing, and explaining that he needed to ask some questions, requesting Midoriya to step outside for privacy. Eri felt uneasy about Izuku leaving her side, but the doctor assured her that she would keep her safe until he returned. A comforting hug from Izuku helped her feel a bit better. He promised he would be just around the corner and would be back quickly. Eri nodded, albeit reluctantly. Izuku was given crutches to assist him in walking. He and Tsukauchi stepped outside the room, positioning themselves in front of a window so Eri could see him. Tsukauchi informed Izuku that since he had only woken up that morning, he might not be aware of the news and proceeded to fill him in. Tsukauchi explained that the man Izuku had faced was Overhaul, the leader of the Yakuza, and thanks to him and his friends, the villain and his gang had been apprehended. Izuku took a moment to absorb this information, but Tsukauchi mentioned that they were still investigating the Hasaikai. Izuku glanced back into the hospital room at the frightened girl who continued to watch him. Tsukauchi then shifted the conversation to a more sensitive topic, asking how Izuku would describe his school life. Surprised by the question, Izuku recalled the near fight with Kachan at the beach and decided it was best to be honest with the detective. He admitted that his school experience had not been pleasant. Although he achieved good grades, being the only quirkless student made him a target for bullying, and he lacked friends at school, as they either avoided him or called him weak. He rubbed his arm while looking down. Tsukauchi noted this and inquired about the teachers and faculty. Izuku replied that they rarely intervened to help, often ignoring him during difficult times. Tsukauchi felt a sense of disgust at the blatant neglect of a student in need. However, he still had one more important question to ask. He asked about Izuku's relationship with Katsuki Bakugo. Izuku anticipated this question, but it did not quell the rising anxiety within him. After taking a deep breath, he began to explain their history. He shared that they had grown up in the same neighborhood and had been close friends during their childhood. However, when Bakugo's quirk manifested, everything changed. Bakugo's powerful explosion quirk garnered admiration, while Izuku remained quirkless. As a result, Bakugo began to distance himself, becoming one of Izuku's main bullies, often belittling his dream of becoming a hero. Tsukauchi listened attentively and asked if Bakugo treated others similarly. Izuku replied that while Bakugo often referred to others as extras and acted superior, he specifically targeted Izuku to ruin his day. Tsukauchi expressed his gratitude for Izuku's cooperation, noting that it would aid their investigation. Izuku was taken aback by the idea of the school being investigated, hoping nothing too severe would arise from it. Tsukauchi suggested they return inside, mentioning that Eri likely missed him. As they walked back in, Eri rushed to hug Izuku's good leg. Concerned, he asked if she was okay, but she simply squeezed him tightly. Despite the discomfort, Izuku bent down to lift her. Tsukauchi informed Izuku that Detective Memori wanted to learn about Eri's past, which had unsettled her. Izuku hobbled to the bed and sat on the edge, holding Eri close. Detective Memori explained that his quirk, Memorabilia, allowed him to see the memories of others by inducing sleep, enabling him to access their past without interference. Izuku found this ability intriguing and wanted to explore it further, but now was not the time. He needed to prepare Eri for the experience of letting a stranger into her mind. He reassured her that everything would be all right, promising to be right there when she woke up. Eri looked up at him, seeking reassurance. He confirmed his promise, holding her hand to help her relax. With that, she allowed the green detective access to her memories, and he gently placed his hand on her head, causing her to drift off to sleep. Memori expressed concern about her power, explaining that anyone whose memories she accessed would relive them vividly, potentially causing panic if those memories were traumatic. The atmosphere in the room was tense until Izuku proposed a solution. He asked if it was possible for another person to see someone else's memories. Memori confirmed that it was feasible but limited to one other person, as she could only manage 2 connections at a time. Izuku pondered the idea of connecting minds, which left everyone else puzzled, but Memori grasped his intention. Izuku suggested that if Eri began to panic, he could help calm her before her quirk spiraled out of control in the real world. The doctor and Tsukauchi exchanged shocked glances while Memori contemplated the plan. She reminded him that what he would witness might be distressing, to which Izuku nodded in understanding. She agreed to proceed but instructed him not to interfere until she had gathered enough information from Eri's past. Izuku lay down next to Eri, allowing the green man to put him to sleep as well. In Eri's dreamscape, Izuku found himself in a dimly lit room filled with crayons, drawings, toys, and a cot. It resembled any typical child's room, and he wondered if it was Eri's. Suddenly, the door opened, prompting him to hide behind a drawer. A man with white hair entered, holding a small Eri, who appeared to be around 3 years old. The man gently asked if she was ready for bed, to which Eri sleepily replied that she was. Izuku felt a sense of warmth at the sight, but it quickly turned to unease when the man's phone rang, shattering the peaceful atmosphere. Eri's eyes widened in surprise, and as her horn began to glow, a burst of light enveloped the room, leaving her alone with a pile of clothes where her father had stood. Memories began to flash before Izuku's eyes. He saw Overhaul looming over Eri, discussing how her quirk Rewind could be exploited to create weapons for the black market. The scene shifted to a dark room where Izuku hid behind a table, witnessing Eri strapped to a chair, her tiny voice pleading for the pain to stop as she was drained of her blood. The anguish in her cries was unbearable for Izuku, who felt a pang of helplessness as he observed Overhaul's cold indifference. Izuku's heart sank when he saw Overhaul's hand reach toward Eri, declaring his intent to start from scratch. In a moment that would haunt him forever, Eri was torn apart and hastily reassembled. The dream world around them began to destabilize, and Izuku's heart ached for Eri, realizing the extent of her suffering. He spoke aloud, unaware that no one could hear him. The next memory showed Eri running down an alley toward a light, which Izuku interpreted as her escape from pain. However, he recognized the moment when she collided with someone who had familiar green hair, accompanied by 2 other indistinct figures. As Eri expressed concern, Overhaul appeared behind her, and Izuku recognized the terror in her eyes. After witnessing this torment, he could no longer remain a passive observer. When Overhaul commanded Eri to return, the boy holding her transformed, dropping the snowball and glaring at Overhaul with fury. He confronted Overhaul, demanding to know how he could treat a child so cruelly. The villain questioned his audacity, but Izuku charged forward, seizing Overhaul's wrists and holding him in place. He vowed that Overhaul would pay for his actions, delivering a powerful strike that sent him crashing to the ground. In an instant, Overhaul vanished along with everything else. In reality, Eri clung to Izuku, seeking comfort as he held her protectively. The 3 adults decided to give them space, allowing Eri to continue crying into Izuku's chest while he did his best to reassure her. She managed to stammer that someone had hurt her, and Izuku gently wiped her tears away, promising that it was just a bad dream and that she would never have to face that pain again. His voice, filled with determination, brought her a sense of safety she desperately needed. During her dream, Eri could hear Izuku's voice and feel his presence, his warmth surrounding her. It was as if he was with her during her darkest moments. Perhaps that was why her next memory was of meeting him rescuing her from a nightmare. In his arms, she felt a warmth unlike any other, safe, welcoming, and filled with love. Eri expressed her gratitude, calling him Papa, which startled Izuku. He quickly realized that Eri had fallen asleep. Wrapping the blanket around them, he settled in beside her, both exhausted from their visit. Meanwhile, Shoto had just finished another training session with Endeavor, who seemed to take too much pleasure in it. Shoto felt disgusted that he was doing exactly what Endeavor always wanted, but he pushed those feelings aside. He needed to grow stronger to face villains. Having witnessed firsthand the challenges heroes faced, he resolved to suppress his emotions and become a hero capable of protecting others from any threat. Endeavor, with a smug expression, mentioned that he wanted to discuss something with Shoto now that he was past his rebellious phase. Shoto, however, brushed him off, wanting nothing to do with Enji after their training sessions. He returned to his room, sitting at his desk and using his ice powers to soothe his aching muscles. He thought to himself that while his father was difficult to be around, he was also an exceptional trainer. Remembering Izuku in the hospital, covered in casts, fueled his determination. He took out a pen and paper, beginning to write a letter to Midoriya. In Momo's room, she was busy preparing a care package for Izuku and Eri. She included blankets, coloring books, crayons, his hoodie, and a heartfelt letter to complete it. Although she hated not being able to celebrate Izuku's birthday with him, she hoped he would feel her support. In the Midoriya household, Inko was in the kitchen, preparing a large bento box for her son. As a nurse, she knew the hospital food wasn't the best, and she wanted to ensure he had something nourishing. A letter was taped to the lid of the box. In the hospital, sunlight streamed through the window of the shared room where Izuku and Eri were. The golden rays gently stirred Izuku awake. He felt a weight on his chest. Eri had fallen asleep on him, lulled by the rhythm of his heartbeat. He smiled at the sight of the little girl, who had endured so much, now looking peaceful in her slumber. He was grateful to provide her with that sense of security. Reaching for his phone, he checked the time, 8:02 a.m. His eyes widened in disbelief. How could so much time have passed? They had fallen asleep in the afternoon after the detectives visited them around 4 p.m. The realization hit him hard. 16 hours? How could that be possible? He recalled how Detective Memori's power worked and realized that the extended sleep must have been an after effect. Then he remembered Eri clinging to him tightly and calling him Papa. Izuku's quickened heartbeat served as Eri's personal alarm clock. She rubbed her tired eyes and looked up at him. He greeted her with a cheerful "good morning," to which she replied softly, still nestled against him. Seizing the moment, he decided to address the unspoken feelings between them. He asked Eri if they could talk, making her look up at him with curiosity. He gently reminded her of the previous day when she had called him Papa. He could sense her tension as she confessed that she felt safe with him and didn't want him to leave. Sitting up, he pulled her into a comforting embrace as tears welled in her eyes. He reassured her that he would never leave her, promising to stay by her side. Eri sniffled and hugged him back, finding solace in his words. After calming her down and turning on the TV for her, Izuku took a moment to reflect on their situation. A 5-year-old girl was now emotionally attached to him, calling him Papa, and he had just promised not to abandon her. He was still in middle school, and the thought of leaving her in an orphanage or foster care was unbearable, especially after sharing such a profound bond through her dreams. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door as the doctor entered with 2 boxes and letters. She cheerfully announced that someone had birthday mail for him, placing the items on his bed. Izuku's face lit up with a smile, realizing he had forgotten it was his birthday, despite having mentioned it to Eri the day before. He expressed his gratitude to the doctor, feeling a surge of happiness. Izuku received a birthday surprise from a friend, and as he acknowledged her gesture, Eri, curious, inquired about the gifts. He explained that it was his 15th birthday, but due to his health, he was unable to leave the hospital, so gifts were sent to him instead. Eri settled beside her father as they examined the contents of the care package. Izuku picked up a package from Momo, his girlfriend, and shared a brief description of her with Eri. She recognized the tall girl with black hair from their previous encounter. Izuku showed Eri a picture of Momo, who was indeed beautiful, and he expressed his feelings for her, describing her as kind, intelligent, and special to him. Eri, holding the phone, admired Momo's image, acknowledging her beauty with a simple observation. As they continued to explore the care package, Izuku pulled out a cozy red blanket and his favorite blue hoodie, wondering why Momo had included his clothing instead of his mother. Attached to the hoodie was a note from Momo, apologizing for borrowing it without permission and expressing her affection for him. Izuku chuckled at Momo's cute drawing accompanying the note. He then discovered some gifts for Eri, which made her feel special. Among the items were coloring books and crayons, which brought her joy even if she was unsure how to use them. Izuku also presented her with a honey brown bear plush that Momo had made, which Eri embraced tightly, though her smile would take a little longer to emerge. Izuku then shared Momo's letter with Eri, reading it aloud. The letter conveyed Momo's concern for both of them, expressing her pride in Izuku's bravery and her hopes for his recovery. Eri listened intently, feeling a connection to this kind-hearted girl. Next, Izuku opened a bento box from his mother, which contained a heartfelt letter. She expressed her pride in his actions that saved a life and acknowledged her worry for him. As he read, emotions overwhelmed him, and he shed a few tears. Eri noticed and, concerned, asked if he was all right. Izuku reassured her with a bright smile, insisting he felt better than ever. After composing himself, Izuku opened the bento box, which was still warm. The delicious aroma wafted through the air, making Eri's stomach rumble. He offered her the first bite of the pork, and as she tasted it, her eyes widened with delight. The flavors exploded in her mouth, and she eagerly nodded in approval, clearly enjoying the meal prepared by his mother. Eri smiled, a small but meaningful expression. Izuku continued to spoon-feed Eri, watching her enjoy each delicious bite with a bright smile. By the time she was satisfied, more than half the box was empty. He remarked on her impressive appetite, feeling pleased with her leftovers. Eri apologized, expressing how much she loved her grandmother's cooking. Izuku couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. However, he suddenly recalled her mention of Grandma, and a wave of panic washed over him. He worried about how his mother would react to this revelation, especially now that Eri was finally smiling. He quickly dismissed the thought when he saw Eri's joyful face. After finishing his meal, Izuku turned his attention to the last letter from Shoto. In the letter, Shoto shared updates about his life since Izuku had been in the hospital. He explained how, after Izuku's injury, he had confronted Chisaki with newfound determination, using his left side to its fullest potential. He described how focusing on defeating the villain helped him forget his own struggles. He expressed regret that it took Izuku's injury to motivate him to change, and mentioned that he had started training his fire with his father. He also shared his plans to visit his mother, finally ready to speak with her face to face. Shoto concluded by thanking Izuku for opening his eyes and wishing him and Eri a swift recovery, signing off with a heartfelt birthday wish. Izuku reflected on the letter, surprised by the length of Shoto's message, which was unexpected from someone so reserved. Eri, curious about the letter, asked who it was from. Izuku explained that it was from a good friend, describing Shoto's distinctive red and white hair, mismatched eyes, and scarred face. Eri listened intently, contemplating the significance of this person. Later, after the doctors had done their work, Izuku was relieved to hear he would be cleared to go home the following afternoon. The prospect of reuniting with his friends and family filled him with joy, but he hesitated. He glanced at Eri, who was focused on coloring a blue dog. He wondered what would happen to her. Noticing his concern, the doctor approached him for a private conversation. Eri was content as long as Izuku promised to return quickly. Izuku inquired about Eri's future. The doctor explained that they couldn't keep her in the hospital indefinitely. Given her quirk, it was crucial for her to grow up in a stable environment. The nurse elaborated on Eri's abilities, revealing that she could rewind the state of living beings. After using her power on Izuku to help him recover, it became clear that Eri was afraid of strangers, and her panic could lead to her losing control of her quirk. Therefore, maintaining her emotional stability was essential, and she felt safe only with Izuku. The doctor confirmed that the police believed it would be best for Eri to stay with Izuku, pending his mother's approval. He would need to demonstrate that he could provide for her basic needs, including education, nutritious meals, and emotional support. The implications of this responsibility weighed heavily on Izuku. He realized that taking care of Eri felt a lot like raising a child. Eri playfully teased him about it, causing him to blush. He sighed, overwhelmed by the situation. Eri was a deeply scarred child in need of love and support to prevent her powers from spiraling out of control. She had formed a strong attachment to Izuku, viewing him as a father figure. Though he was only 15, the thought of leaving her behind was unbearable. While adopting her might be a stretch, he could certainly provide her with shelter and care, ensuring she felt safe and loved. The doctor inquired if Izuku was comfortable with the situation after expressing his concerns. He covered his mouth, realizing he hadn't done that in a while. For the moment, the doctor suggested that Izuku try to relax and perhaps inform his mother. Izuku bowed in gratitude before returning to his room, where Eri sat on the bed with several blank sheets of paper and a green crayon. He asked her what she was doing. Eri expressed her desire to write letters and asked for his help. Izuku smiled, feeling proud of her progress in communicating with others. He sat beside and guided her on how to write, asking what she wanted to say. They began their writing session as the sun dipped below the horizon and continued until the moon rose, accompanied by twinkling stars. Teaching Eri to write consumed most of their time, and Izuku also wanted to respond to everyone. He held 3 double-sided letters sealed in envelopes as they headed to the desk to mail them. Since it was dark, they were relieved not to encounter anyone, easing Eri's anxiety. Upon returning to their room, Eri put on Izuku's oversized hoodie, which reached her knees and had sleeves that extended past her elbows. It warmed Izuku's heart to see her in it. They climbed into bed, and he covered them with the cozy red blanket Momo had given them, far more comfortable than the hospital sheets. Before drifting off to sleep, Eri revealed something she had hidden under her pillow. She pulled out a drawing of herself and Izuku as stick figures, holding hands in a field of grass and flowers, with a heart between them. The drawing melted Izuku's heart, but it was Eri's next words that truly overwhelmed him. She wished him a happy birthday, calling him Papa. Izuku was unable to contain his emotions and was brought to tears. He embraced Eri tightly, expressing his gratitude. They both went to bed with smiles, and Izuku's last thoughts before falling asleep were that it had been the best birthday ever. Meanwhile, Inko was watching TV to pass the time when a knock on her door interrupted her. A letter was placed in her mailbox, addressed to her from the hospital, sent by Izuku and Eri. She hurried inside and opened it with anticipation. The letter began with an apology for worrying her, assuring her that they were doing well, and that Izuku would be discharged that afternoon. He thanked her for the birthday lunch, stating it had been perfect. However, he mentioned needing to discuss something complicated when she arrived at the hospital. Inko felt relief at the thought of seeing her son healthy again, but the end of his letter piqued her curiosity, leaving her with questions. She flipped the letter over and noticed a second part written in green crayon. Eri's message conveyed that she was no longer hurt, but expressed her desire not to be alone and her wish to meet Inko that day. It took Inko a moment to realize that this was Eri's letter, written by Izuku on her behalf. However, her main concern was the term grandma. She wondered what Eri meant by that, thinking to herself that she wasn't that old. She decided to save her questions for when she arrived at the hospital and resolved to send Izuku some clothes, knowing he couldn't leave in a hospital gown. At the Yaoyorozu mansion, Momo awoke after a restless night, feeling the absence of Izuku's hoodie, which had been her source of comfort. After dressing, she received a letter from one of the maids that made her heart race when she saw the sender's name. The letter informed her that Izuku was doing well and would be cleared to go home that afternoon. However, he mentioned that something had come up and he needed her to come over the following day. He promised to call that night to explain further and reassured her not to feel guilty about what had happened to him, emphasizing that she had incredible potential and that failure simply meant there was room for growth. He ended the letter with affection. Momo felt warmth in her heart as she read his comforting words. Yet, she was puzzled by his request to talk about something important and why he wanted to wait until tomorrow. Turning the paper over, she found a second part written in green crayon. Eri introduced herself and apologized for Izuku's injury. She expressed her enjoyment of staying with him and her desire not to be alone anymore, thanking Momo for the toys and blanket. Eri Momo felt a flutter of joy upon reading Eri's message, grateful for Izuku's support, though a hint of skepticism lingered in her mind. Todoroki Household Shoto was preparing for an early morning training session with Endeavor when Fuyumi approached him, holding a letter. The letter read that Izuku was doing well and expressed gratitude for Shoto's concern. Izuku mentioned his recent battle with Overhaul, encouraging Shoto to trust himself and suggesting that their mother would be proud of his growth. Shoto smiled at the note, feeling a renewed determination to face his father. He noted that Eri had not written to him, as Izuku had mentioned she found him a bit intimidating. The hospital Izuku awoke in his hospital room for the last time, ready for the day ahead. He had grown accustomed to waking up with Eri nestled against him. Knowing today would be challenging for her, he decided to let her sleep a bit longer. After a while, Eri stirred, yawning and stretching. Izuku greeted her warmly, asking if she had slept well. She responded positively, calling him Papa. He carefully considered how to explain the day's events to her. He asked Eri if she knew what day it was, but she shook her head. He revealed that he would be leaving the hospital today, which caused Eri to tremble at the thought of being alone. Sensing her distress, Izuku quickly wrapped her in a comforting hug. He reassured her that he wasn't abandoning her. The doctor had suggested that Eri could come live with him, but he wanted to ensure she truly wanted that. With tearful eyes, Eri affirmed her desire to stay with him, and they shared a heartfelt embrace. Izuku informed her that his mother would be visiting later that afternoon, encouraging her to remain calm as he stroked her back gently. Later, after completing his final round of recovery treatments, Izuku felt physically restored, with only scars remaining as reminders of his injuries. At 2:15 p.m., he received clearance to go home, and the moment he had been waiting for was finally approaching. The doctor informed him that she would notify his mother of his release. As she walked away, she handed him Eri's blood test results and the legal documents allowing Eri to live with the Midoriyas. The weight of these papers added to Izuku's anxiety. The blood test indicated that Eri was malnourished and underweight for her age, requiring vitamin supplements and nutritious meals for a few weeks. While manageable, it still concerned him. The legal documents posed a different challenge. Although Izuku was determined to have Eri in his life, his mother had yet to meet her. He worried about how to explain Eri's attachment issues to her and to Momo. He realized he hadn't considered how this would impact his relationship with Momo, having essentially committed to parenting Eri without discussing it with her. Additionally, school was on the horizon, and Eri's fear of strangers made daycare a daunting prospect. He felt overwhelmed by the long-term implications of this new responsibility. Papa? Izuku was pulled from his thoughts by Eri's small voice. He turned to her, noticing her nervousness as she fidgeted with her fingers. She asked if his mother would like her, reminding him that Eri had her own insecurities. He reassured her that he was confident his mother would adore her, knowing how wonderful Eri truly was. Hospital front desk Inko arrived, carrying a duffel bag filled with fresh clothes for Izuku, relieved to finally have her son back. She followed the doctor who had been caring for him and Eri. The doctor reassured Inko that Izuku was in excellent health. Inko expressed her worries about him and inquired about Eri's well-being. The doctor confirmed that Eri was doing well and that she and Izuku had formed a close bond, choosing to keep the surprise under wraps for now. Finally, they arrived at Izuku's room. Inko rushed in to embrace her son, expressing her relief and concern. She exclaimed how scared she had been and urged him never to do that again, holding him tightly. Izuku apologized, promising he wouldn't repeat his actions while returning her hug. After a moment, they separated, and Izuku received a bag of clothes to change into. Inko, focused on her son, failed to notice the nervous-looking girl sitting on the bed, wearing one of Izuku's hoodies. Inko offered a warm smile to ease the girl's anxiety. She introduced herself, saying she was Izuku's mother, and welcomed the girl, Eri. Eri flinched at the gesture, but managed to greet Inko quietly. Izuku had just changed into a plain white shirt and long pants when he stood beside the bed, and Eri instinctively clung to him again. He felt the weight of the conversation ahead. Eri expressed her fear, which made Inko's eyes widen as she processed the girl's words. Izuku began to sweat under the pressure of the moment. Inko's tone shifted, demanding an explanation from her son. Inko listened intently as Izuku and the nurse explained the situation. Eri's traumatic past, her attachment to Izuku, and the potential consequences of sending her to a foster home. Inko took a deep breath, trying to absorb the gravity of the situation. She summarized what she understood, realizing the depth of Eri's suffering and her reliance on Izuku for comfort. She recognized that sending Eri away could lead to disastrous outcomes, especially considering the unique challenges posed by Eri's quirk. Izuku, feeling the weight of the moment, acknowledged the situation while Eri hid behind him, peeking out nervously. Eri then asked for a moment alone with Izuku, and he excused himself while the doctor stayed with her. Inko expressed her disbelief at Izuku's willingness to take on such a responsibility, causing him to shrink back. He acknowledged his youth but insisted that he couldn't abandon Eri. Inko sighed, trying to process the implications of his decision. Izuku then revealed that a detective had used a memory viewing quirk to connect their minds, allowing him to witness Eri's painful memories firsthand. He felt a deep sense of responsibility to help her, knowing they had formed a strong bond. Inko was taken aback by her son's determination, realizing she had never seen him so resolute before. The door opened, and Eri emerged, looking distressed. She clutched the oversized hoodie tightly and expressed her fear of Izuku getting into trouble for helping her. She pleaded for Inko not to be angry, emphasizing how safe Izuku made her feel. Izuku instinctively moved to comfort Eri, assuring her that she had nothing to worry about. Inko observed the scene, feeling a mix of emotions: fear, shock, skepticism, but also overwhelming pride and adoration for her son and the bond he shared with Eri. She recognized that separating them would only cause pain. After a moment of contemplation, Inko asked to see the necessary papers. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise at her response. Inko confirmed her decision to sign the documents, allowing Eri to stay with them, but reminded Izuku to be certain about his choice. He held Eri firmly, affirming his commitment. They returned to the room where the doctor awaited with the documents. Inko signed them, officially welcoming Eri into the Midoriya family. Izuku expressed his gratitude to his mother, apologizing for the added stress. Eri approached Inko, taking her hand in both of hers, gazing up with bright, hopeful eyes. In that moment, Inko felt a sense of certainty about her decision. Tears streamed down her face as she held Eri's hands tightly. The doctor provided them with Eri's blood tests results, outlining the diet and medication she would require. She also directed them to a nearby pharmacy where they could find everything they needed, then bid them farewell. Izuku and Eri expressed their gratitude for all the doctor had done for them. As they settled into Inko's car, Izuku occupied the front seat next to his mother, while Eri sat on his lap, his arms wrapped around her securely. The trio drove to the pharmacy, an awkward silence enveloping them. Eri, however, was captivated by the scenery whizzing by. Her curiosity piqued despite the fear that came from her past experiences. Once they parked outside the pharmacy, Inko took the list of items Eri needed. She asked if Eri wanted anything from the nearby grocery store. Eri turned her gaze from the window and requested apples. Inko nodded and left the unofficial father-daughter duo alone. Izuku took a moment to reflect. Eri was now living with him. While his mother would assist, he felt a strong sense of responsibility for Eri's well-being and happiness. His thoughts drifted to how Momo would react to this news. Would she think he was being foolish like Inko did? It was certainly a possibility. But what would her feelings be toward Eri? Eri interrupted his thoughts by tugging on his sleeve, asking where Momo was. Izuku considered that it might be wise to wait until the next day to introduce Eri to Momo. He felt fortunate that his mother had agreed to this arrangement, but he didn't want to push his luck by bringing Momo into it on the same day. Eri inquired if Momo knew about her staying with him. Izuku admitted that he hadn't told her yet, and even his mother had only just learned of it. Eri rested her head against Izuku's chest, suggesting he should inform Momo. Izuku paused, realizing that giving Momo a heads up would likely save him from a lengthy discussion later. He didn't need to share every detail, just enough to prepare her. That seemed like a good plan, so he quickly pulled out his phone and began typing. In Momo's room, she was sitting on her bed, engrossed in a romance novel. Reading had always been a beloved pastime for her, and since meeting Izuku, her interest in the genre had deepened. She often gravitated towards stories about arranged marriages, likely due to her own upbringing. As a child, she read them to understand what such unions might entail. While many stories depicted grim realities, she always found solace in the endings where the protagonist was rescued by someone deserving of their love. Her attention shifted when her phone vibrated on the desk. Picking it up, she noticed it was a message from Izuku. He informed her that he was out of the hospital, which brought her joy. However, his next message hinted at something more serious, prompting her concern. She wondered if he had encountered trouble while he was away. Izuku reassured her that nothing bad had happened, but then he mentioned Eri, reminding her of the girl who had been so attached to him during his hospital stay. Momo's heart sank as she considered the implications of Izuku's message. She asked who was with Eri now that he was discharged. It was time for Izuku to explain the situation. He revealed that Eri was struggling with anxiety and PTSD, making foster homes unsuitable for her. Momo's suspicion grew as she awaited more details. When Izuku sent her a photo of himself holding Eri in his lap, her eyes widened in shock. The reality of the situation hit her hard. Izuku's message left her with more questions than answers, but she knew she had time to process everything. Eri was staying with Izuku, and while she had concerns, she also recognized that he had saved her and that they had formed a bond over the past few days. Momo felt reassured that Eri would be in a better environment with the Midoriyas. As she calmed herself, she decided to find a book about caring for children, her mind racing with thoughts about Eri's well-being. Meanwhile, Izuku felt relieved after sending the message, hoping that Momo would understand. To ease the tension, he turned on the radio, filling the car with music. Eri listened closely to the soothing piano melody and the gentle voice, feeling comforted in her papa's embrace. The warmth and security made her eyelids grow heavy, and she soon drifted off to sleep in Izuku's arms. When Inko returned, she felt a rush of joy at the sight of the adorable girl peacefully resting on her son. After their car ride, Izuku carried Eri and her bag filled with apple-themed snacks up the stairs to their apartment. He had packed apples, apple juice boxes, applesauce packets, and even apple pie for dessert later. As he reached the door, he turned the doorknob and welcomed her inside. "Welcome home, Eri," he said, gently placing her down. Eri stepped into the apartment, her eyes wide as she took in her new surroundings, her expression a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. Izuku asked if she wanted to see the bedroom, and Eri nodded in response. He took her hand and guided her to his room, feeling a sense of comfort in being back in his familiar space. The posters and notebooks were just as he had left them. As Eri entered the room, Izuku helped her sit on the bed, which felt much softer than the hospital bed. He handed her the red blanket and the stuffed bear that Momo had made for her. Eri remained quiet, prompting Izuku to check in on her. He noticed her sniffle and felt a wave of concern wash over him. Eri was crying. He quickly asked if something was wrong, but before he could finish, she stood up on the bed and hugged him tightly, her small arms wrapping around his neck. She expressed her gratitude through her tears, and Izuku held her close, doing his best to comfort her. The afternoon was spent helping Eri settle in. For lunch, Izuku introduced her to katsudon, his favorite dish, and she eagerly devoured every bite, even if it left her with a stomach ache. After taking her medicine, she found the bitter taste unpleasant. As night fell, it was time for Eri to take a bath and get cleaned up. Inko assisted her while Izuku rummaged through his closet for something old that would fit her. Eri ended up wearing his old All Might onesie to bed, although she preferred his hoodie. Having grown accustomed to it, she snuggled up next to Izuku in the same bed, which he didn't mind at all. As they settled down for the night, Izuku wished her goodnight, and Eri responded with a sleepy acknowledgement. In the early hours, Izuku was awakened by a trembling sensation against him. He realized it was Eri, who was softly crying and shaking, as if she were trying to escape from something in her dreams. Understanding that she was having a nightmare, he gently shook her awake. "Eri, wake up, you're safe now. He can't hurt you anymore," he reassured her. Eri gasped awake and clung to him, her soft cries filling the room. Calming her had become almost instinctual for Izuku after all the times he had done so. He assured her that Overhaul was gone and that she didn't have to worry anymore. He promised to protect her, and Eri slowly nodded against his chest, though she still trembled. Izuku decided to sing the lullaby she had fallen asleep to in the car, hoping it would soothe her. As he sang, Eri absorbed everything, The warmth of his embrace, his kindness, the steady rhythm of his heartbeats, and the softness of his voice. It was all perfect for helping her relax. Gradually, she calmed down enough to drift back to listening to Izuku's gentle singing. He rubbed her back one last time and kissed her forehead, whispering a soft goodnight. The next morning, Izuku was jolted awake by his All Might-themed alarm clock, which startled Eri. He regretted not replacing it with a more conventional clock as he tried to soothe her. Once she had settled down, it was time to discuss the day ahead, though that could wait. Since Eri was already awake, Izuku carried her to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. He was making apple cinnamon pancakes while Eri sat on the counter beside him. The delicious aroma wafted through the air, waking Inko, who smiled at the sight of her son in an apron, cooking pancakes. "Good morning, Mom." "Pancakes are almost ready," Izuku greeted her. Eri, still adjusting to her new surroundings, shyly called out to Inko, who responded warmly. "Good morning, Eri. How are you today?" She assured everyone that she was fine, though her stomach growled softly. Izuku carefully stacked the pancakes into a tall tower before dividing them among 3 plates. Eri's pancakes were cut into small, manageable pieces, topped with honey and apple cinnamon, and she was given a fork to make it easier for her to eat. Izuku observed Eri with great interest as she took in the delicious aroma of the food, her mouth watering in anticipation. He had passed the sniff test. Now it was time for the taste test. Eri picked up her fork and speared one of the pancake bites, bringing it to her mouth and savoring the fluffy texture. Izuku felt a mix of excitement and anxiety as he wondered how she would react. Once Eri swallowed, a small smile spread across her face, and she exclaimed how delicious it was before taking another bite. Izuku let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, feeling a wave of warmth wash over him at the sight of Eri enjoying his cooking. It was a moment that nearly brought him to tears, while Inko watched with her own tears of joy. She couldn't help but express her emotions, mumbling about how her son had a child of his own. Izuku was still trying to process this new chapter in his life. Inko then asked if Momo was aware of the situation, causing Izuku to nearly choke on his food. He explained that he had informed Momo that Eri would be staying with them and that she would be visiting soon. Eri, however, was too focused on her breakfast to pay attention to the conversation between her papa and grandma. Inko expressed relief that Izuku had thought to warn Momo, recalling how she had almost had a heart attack the previous day. Izuku, feeling nervous, glanced away, prompting Inko to give him a questioning look. He awkwardly admitted that he had only thought to tell Momo because Eri had suggested it, which left Inko with a wide-eyed expression, realizing that a 5-year-old had to remind him about his girlfriend. After breakfast, Inko took care of the dishes while Izuku helped Eri with her medicine and brushing her teeth. When it came time to dress her, it was a simple choice. Eri eagerly put on Izuku's All Might onesie and blue hoodie. Inko made a mental note to add "buy Eri clothes" to her to-do list. Meanwhile, Momo was riding in her family's limo toward the Midoriya's apartment, filled with excitement to see her boyfriend and finally meet Eri. However, she couldn't shake her concerns about Eri's background and the attachment she seemed to have formed with Izuku. Momo wondered how deep that bond would go and what role she would play in Eri's life. Upon arriving, her driver brought her back to reality, and she instructed him to return later in the afternoon, sensing that the day ahead would be long. As she climbed the stairs, Momo nervously knocked on the front door, reminding herself that Izuku was safe and that she just needed to express how much she had missed him. When the door opened, she was greeted by Izuku's bright green eyes, which were filled with warmth and life. Overwhelmed with emotion, Momo couldn't help but tackle him to the floor, showering his face with kisses. Each affectionate gesture made Izuku feel as if he might be swept away again, but he was determined to stay grounded. Momo expressed her relief and concern through her kisses, unaware that tears were falling as she held him close. The sight of her crying only fueled Izuku's determination to comfort her, and he bravely kissed her back. Caught off guard by his response, Momo melted into the moment, their connection deepening as they embraced on the floor. After what felt like an eternity, they finally pulled away for air, their faces flushed and eyes reflecting their affection for one another. Izuku confessed his love and apologized for causing her worry, while Momo gently cupped his cheek and urged him not to scare her like that again, assuring him of her love in return. Just as they were about to kiss again, they were interrupted. Inko stood in the hallway, arms crossed and a stern expression on her face. The two teenagers quickly scrambled to their feet, feeling the weight of her gaze. Inko remarked on how clearly they had missed each other. After giving them a brief but firm reminder about boundaries, Inko left Izuku and Momo in charge of Eri. She had errands to run, including buying supplies for their new housemate, such as clothes, towels, child toothpaste, and toys. With Inko gone, Izuku and Momo found themselves sitting awkwardly in the living room, responsible for Eri. Momo initiated the conversation, inquiring if Eri truly lived with Izuku now. Izuku confirmed that the police had determined it was best for Eri to stay with him, as he was the only one she trusted enough to feel at ease. Momo absorbed the information, realizing that her boyfriend had been entrusted with the care of a young girl. Curious, Momo expressed her desire to meet Eri, standing up and following Izuku to his room. She recalled how, during Izuku's hospital stay, Inko had invited her to spend a night, which was how she ended up with his hoodie. The morning after had been filled with some awkward moments. Upon reaching Izuku's room, he chose to enter first, allowing Eri some time to prepare herself. Inside, he found Eri sitting on the floor, focused on her coloring book, although her drawings were more like dark crosses over a bird, created with black and red crayons. Izuku gently knocked on the door to catch her attention, greeting her with a warm smile. Eri paused her activity to look up at him, responding with a soft greeting. He approached her and knelt beside her, mentioning that someone was there. He reminded her of his girlfriend, and Eri stiffened slightly at the mention. When he asked if she wanted to meet Momo, Eri closed her book and stood up, agreeing to the introduction. Izuku lifted her as he stood and called Momo inside. Eri clung to Izuku nervously as Momo entered the room. Though she vaguely remembered Momo from the day of her rescue, she still felt uncertain. Momo appeared calm and friendly on the outside, but inside she was anxious about making a good impression on Eri. She took a few cautious steps forward, aware of Eri's sensitivity. Momo greeted Eri cheerfully, and Eri responded in a quiet voice. Momo noted that Eri seemed to be doing much better and asked if she was enjoying her new home. Izuku felt Eri relax a little in his embrace as she confirmed that she liked staying with him. Izuku's heart raced when Eri referred to him as Papa. Momo was taken aback by this revelation, struggling to process the depth of Eri's attachment to Izuku. She felt a whirlwind of emotions, though she maintained a calm exterior. Izuku waved his hand in front of Momo's face, but she remained unresponsive, lost in her thoughts. Noticing Eri's discomfort, he gently placed her on the bed and led Momo outside for a moment. Once outside, Izuku attempted to speak, but Momo interrupted him, cupping his cheeks and demanding to know what had happened. He squirmed away and began to explain. Momo expressed her shock at the intensity of Eri's past experiences, realizing how harrowing they had been for such a young child. She questioned whether Eri had any relatives, to which Izuku replied that her grandfather was in a coma and her mother might still be alive, but their relationship had not been good. Momo's concern deepened as she processed this information. She couldn't believe that Izuku had chosen to delve into Eri's memories, but he stood firm in his decision, expressing no regrets. Momo could see how much Eri meant to Izuku and understood that she would have to embrace this new reality. As thoughts of their future together crossed her mind, she wondered if Eri would come to see her as the other parental figure she needed in her life. Suddenly, the door to Izuku's room swung open, and Eri sprinted out with tears streaming down her face. Momo stopped in her tracks as the girl collided with her legs, hugging them tightly. Eri sobbed softly against Momo, trembling. Both Momo and Izuku were at a loss for what to do. They knew Eri didn't like being left alone for long, but this level of panic was new. Eri choked on her tears, expressing her sorrow. She felt guilty for what had happened to Izuku, believing her quirk had caused harm. Izuku quickly pieced together the situation. Eri's last encounter with her biological mother had ended in abandonment, and the thought of having a mother figure again stirred painful memories. Seeing Izuku leave with Momo had triggered those feelings. Izuku bent down to comfort Eri, rubbing her shoulders gently. He reassured her, emphasizing that she had done nothing wrong. Eri's trembling began to subside as he explained that he had been hurt due to Overhaul and his own choices, not because of her. In fact, her rewind quirk had helped him recover. He told her that her quirk was a blessing and that she herself was a blessing, thanking her for what she had done. As Eri loosened her grip on Momo, Zuko wrapped his arms around her waist. Momo knelt in front of the teary-eyed girl, apologizing for causing her worry. She admitted to being surprised and a bit scared about meeting Eri. Momo expressed her desire for Eri to live happily despite the circumstances. Momo placed her hands gently on Eri's shoulders and pressed her forehead against hers. Eri found comfort in the loving embrace of both Momo and Izuku. Unbeknownst to them, Eri continued to cry softly, but these were no longer tears of sadness. After a few minutes, Eri's body relaxed in Izuku's arms, and she fell asleep. He carried her back to the bedroom, noticing that his chair had been moved next to the doorway. It seemed that little Eri couldn't reach the door handle on her own. Climbing into bed with her, he felt her strong grip on him, even in her sleep. He asked Momo if she was joining them. Momo hesitated, maintaining a respectful distance from Eri, concerned about causing her any distress. When she questioned if it was okay, Izuku nodded confidently. Momo knew he would encourage her to join them, not just because she missed sleeping soundly, but also because she wanted to be close to him again. Eventually, she decided to join them in bed. Eri nestled comfortably between the two teens, and Momo took a moment to admire Eri's peaceful sleeping form, smiling at the sight. Momo joked about how Eri was allowed to wear Izuku's clothes and sleep in the same bed, expressing her mixed feelings about it. Izuku chuckled at her humor and wrapped an arm around both Momo and Eri. Momo then asked seriously what he was doing. Izuku reflected on his responsibilities, realizing she wanted something more definitive. He stated that he was parenting Eri. Momo took a deep breath, acknowledging that he had sprung this on her without considering her feelings. When she opened her eyes, she asked if he wanted to know her thoughts. Izuku, feeling apprehensive, nodded for her to continue. Momo expressed her shock, a bit of anger, and worry, not about being Eri's mother figure, but about whether Eri would accept her as one. Izuku's eyes widened. He had expected her fear to be about the role itself, not about acceptance. He reassured her that Eri did not hate her, pointing out how Eri had run to her in her moment of fear. He explained that this instinct showed Eri wanted to build a good relationship with her. Izuku held both Momo and Eri close, expressing his belief that she would make a fantastic mom if she was willing. Momo's eyes filled with tears as she felt moved by his encouraging words. Izuku leaned in and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead, offering her comfort and support. Momo began to express her thoughts, noting how quickly things were moving, which made her laugh. Izuku joined in, but then he realized that Eri's progress would require time and patience. They could only do so much for her during the remainder of the summer, and she might not feel comfortable enough to attend daycare just yet. Her scars could take years to fade, and some might even be permanent. It wasn't as if Aldera would grant him time off to care for a 5-year-old. Momo remarked on how fortunate he was at that moment. Izuku realized he must have muttered something similar. She continued, sharing that she would be homeschooled from the end of summer until high school, as her family decided it would be best to eliminate certain distractions. Izuku's eyes widened in surprise, and he couldn't help but shower Momo's face with affectionate pecks. She giggled with each gentle kiss he placed on her. She playfully pushed him away, her cheeks flushed with a bright smile. Finally feeling relaxed, they both drifted off to sleep with Eri nestled between them. 2 hours later, Izuku was the first to awaken. He stretched lightly and gazed at the sleeping beauties in his arms, feeling as if he were cradling his own little family. He quickly dismissed the thought and checked the time, realizing it was 1:43 p.m. He thought about how hungry the two would likely be upon waking and decided that lunch would be his responsibility. After some effort, he managed to free himself from Momo and Eri's embrace without disturbing them. Before leaving, he gently turned Eri to face Momo, grateful that she was a deep sleeper. With a bounce in his step, Izuku made his way to the kitchen. He opted for a simple yet delicious meal, ramen. Donning an apron, he began preparing the meal for his special ladies. Not long after Izuku left the bed, Momo woke up. The first thing she noticed was Eri's peaceful face. She carefully brushed a strand of white hair from Eri's forehead and caressed her cheek, promising to do her best for the little angel. Momo stood and walked over to Izuku's closet. Meeting Eri had been a stressful experience, and she needed something to soothe her nerves. A cup of tea while wearing one of Izuku's shirts sounded perfect. In the kitchen, Izuku was cutting chicken into small strips and seasoning it, while the noodles boiled in a pot beside him. He paused when he felt a pair of arms wrap around his waist from behind. Momo leaned against him, nodding in response to his question about her rest. When he asked if she was hungry, she nodded again, and he mentioned he was making chicken ramen, suggesting she could help with the vegetables. Momo released him and went to the fridge, retrieving spring onions, cauliflower, carrots, a knife, and a chopping board. Izuku was about to ask her to cut the vegetables small, but the words caught in his throat when he finally noticed her outfit. He stammered at the sight of Momo's attire, and she looked away bashfully, apologizing for needing comfortable clothing. He reassured her that it was fine, though he couldn't help but wonder why her shorts were so short. Together, they prepared 3 steaming bowls of chicken ramen, while Momo brewed lavender tea to accompany the meal. Izuku carefully carried the smallest bowl on a tray, complete with a spork for Eri, and quietly opened the door to find the little girl stretching and yawning on his bed. He greeted her and asked if she had slept well, to which she responded while rubbing the sleep from her eyes. He helped her sit up and placed the tray on her lap. As Eri inhaled the delicious aroma of the ramen, her stomach growled in anticipation. She asked what it was, and Momo chimed in, explaining that it was chicken ramen made by her and Izuku. Momo handed Eri her tea while Izuku stepped away briefly to retrieve his and Momo's meals. Eri curiously sniffed the drink and asked about it. Momo explained that it was lavender tea, a beverage that always helped her relax. Eri held the warm cup in her hands and took a sip. A tiny smile appeared on her lips as she expressed her approval, and Momo felt a wave of relief wash over her. Izuku returned with his and Momo's ramen and 2 cups of tea. Sitting on the edge of the bed, they enjoyed their meal together. Before Eri could take her first bite, Momo created a napkin and tucked it into Eri's collar, ensuring that Izuku's hoodie stayed clean. After her first taste, a bright smile lit up Eri's face, her eyes sparkling with delight. She loved the meal that her papa and hopeful mama had prepared for her. After enjoying their delightful lunch, Izuku took the dirty dishes to wash them. Momo almost stood up to assist him, but paused when she felt a gentle grip on her hand. Eri was holding her hand, her gaze focused on something hidden in the bed. Momo inquired about what Eri was searching for, but Eri remained silent until she finally found what she wanted. Momo's heart swelled when Eri revealed the stuffed bear that Momo had crafted for her. Eri expressed her fondness for the bear, saying it was comforting to have when her father wasn't around. Momo felt a rush of emotion, nearly overwhelmed with joy at Eri's words. Perhaps Eri would accept her after all. Momo held Eri's hand as they made their way to the living room. Momo turned on the television for Eri, hoping to keep her entertained while she found a way to release her happiness. In the kitchen, she grabbed a dry cloth and let out a muffled squeal into it. Izuku, finishing up the dishes, heard her muffled excitement and smiled, asking if everything was going well. Momo looked at him with a curious expression, questioning whether it had been his plan to leave her alone with Eri to help them bond. Izuku turned his gaze away, a slight smile growing on his face, and Momo embraced him, planting a kiss on his cheek. They then joined Eri on the couch to watch television together. Time passed, and at 5 p.m., Inko returned home, carrying several bags filled with clothing. She announced her arrival and entered the living room, where she found Izuku, Momo, and Eri sitting closely together on the couch, resembling a small family. Eri lay on her side, using Izuku and Momo's legs as makeshift cushions, which tugged at Inko's heart. Izuku was the first to notice his mother and greeted her, followed by Momo waving and Eri cheerfully calling her Grandma, which caused both Momo and Inko to pause momentarily. Inko then offered Eri some new clothes, prompting Eri to jump up and rush to her, giving Izuku and Momo a moment of privacy. Momo sighed, expressing her affection for Eri, and Izuku agreed, acknowledging her preciousness. Now alone, Momo felt it was the right time to discuss something important. She caught Izuku's attention and began to explain that during her visit with Inko, they had received a visit from his aunt and uncle. Izuku's expression shifted to concern. He asked if his Aunt Mitsuki had caused any trouble, recalling her intimidating nature. Momo reassured him that there was no need to worry, though she agreed that Mitsuki could be quite fearsome. They both shivered at the thought of her. However, Momo continued, the topic shifting to her son, which made Izuku's heart race with unease. He felt a chill run through him as Momo mentioned that his cousin had spoken about him with disdain. Izuku's gaze fell, sadness washing over him. Momo pressed on, asking who Bakugo was to him. Deku hesitated, torn between revealing the truth and wanting to protect Momo from the pain of his past. Taking a deep breath, he began to share his history with Bakugo. They had known each other since childhood, and he had affectionately called Bakugo Kachan. Initially, they had a good relationship, but everything changed after Izuku was diagnosed as quirkless. He explained how Bakugo had developed a powerful explosion quirk, gaining admiration from everyone, including Izuku. However, Bakugo's attitude shifted, leading him to believe he was superior to everyone, especially Izuku, whom he labeled as Deku, meaning worthless. Izuku was ostracized from their friend group and became the target of relentless bullying. Whenever Izuku expressed his dream of becoming a hero, despite being quirkless, Bakugo was the first to dismiss him. The situation escalated when Bakugo destroyed Izuku's desk and burned his notebook after learning about his aspirations to attend UA. Momo's anger bubbled to the surface as she listened. She couldn't comprehend how anyone could view someone like Bakugo as a hero, especially after his actions. Her voice rose in frustration, startling Izuku as she declared that no amount of power could justify Bakugo's behavior. Izuku remained silent, taken aback by Momo's fierce defense of him. It was the first time he had encountered someone who openly opposed Bakugo, leaving him unsure of how to respond. Momo posed a question that lingered in Izuku's mind. If Bakugo was so great, why did he feel the need to belittle him? Izuku paused, reflecting on the years of bullying he had endured without ever questioning Bakugo directly, knowing that such inquiries rarely ended well. She inquired if he had done anything recently. He recalled that just the day before their lunch with Todoroki, he had been training at the beach when Bakugo confronted him, yelling angrily. Fortunately, a police officer intervened before the situation escalated. Momo felt a wave of shock at the thought of police involvement, realizing how serious it was. He quickly reassured her, as if sensing her concern, that when detectives had asked about Eri's past, one of them had also inquired about his, mentioning they were looking into Aldera. This revelation opened up a new line of questioning for Momo. She wondered why his teachers did not take action to help him or discipline Bakugo. He shrank back in his seat, wishing the police would take action against his so-called teachers. Suppressing her own frustration, she took his hand and gazed into his eyes, affirming that he shouldn't have to endure Bakugo's behavior. She reminded him that he was better than Bakugo, emphasizing that raw power did not equate to true strength or heroism. Their discussion was interrupted when Eri returned to the living room, wearing a new outfit. She asked how it looked, and both Izuku and Momo were instantly captivated, forgetting their previous conversation. Izuku lifted Eri, declaring she looked adorable, while Momo complimented how lovely the outfit was. Momo leaned in to whisper to Izuku, expressing that, unlike Bakugo, he was already a hero in their eyes. She rested her head on his shoulder, bringing a smile to his face. Inko entered the room and noticed Eri and Momo both clinging to Izuku, thinking to herself that these three would surely be the end of her, but at least she would have no regrets. Regrettably, Momo received a message that her driver was waiting outside. She apologized, explaining it was time for her to leave. Both Izuku and Eri felt a pang of disappointment at the news. Momo's mother had reminded her of her curfew, which was a result of Momo's upcoming special evening with her future husband. Inko considered allowing her to stay over, but after witnessing the scene at the doorway, she decided against it. As Momo approached the front door, she felt a small hand grasping her. Eri innocently asked if she would return. The question tugged at everyone's hearts, especially Momo's. She knelt down to Eri's level and held her hands, promising that she would come back as often as she could and asked Eri to take care of her papa in the meantime. Eri smiled and nodded, calling her Mama. The word made Momo's heart flutter, and she pulled Eri into a warm embrace. After they separated, Momo finally stepped out, feeling it was one of the hardest goodbyes she had ever faced. With a rosy blush on her cheeks and a tremor in her legs, Momo made her way to her family's limo. Once there, she covered her mouth with her hands and squealed with excitement, kicking her legs in joy at being called Mama. Meanwhile, Izuku was still processing what had just occurred, staring blankly into space as steam seemed to rise from his head. Inko awkwardly suggested that he start dinner and mentioned he could help Eri pick out her pajamas for the night. Snapping out of his daze, Izuku took Eri to choose her bedtime attire. Eri asked why her mama wasn't staying with them. He struggled to contain his surprise at being called Papa again, wondering how to explain. He told her that Momo had her own family to return to and needed time to adjust, assuring her that Mama would only be gone for a little while. Eri accepted this and then asked what pajamas were. He explained that pajamas were comfortable clothes for sleeping, helping one to relax. As he began to suggest a pair, he turned to see Eri holding his hoodie. He realized he probably wouldn't be getting it back. He compromised, allowing her to wear his hoodie over the new pajamas he had laid out. As he arranged the pajamas, he noticed something else on his bed, a rose-pink button-up shirt and a silver-gray skirt, the same outfit Momo had worn when she arrived. He realized she had left wearing his shirt, and he doubted he would see that again either.